All right, perfect. So, welcome um, to Mastermind. Today, I want to talk about due diligence and the due diligence dance. And it's one that we're always doing. It's one that you're going to be doing as long as you're busy. So, just to talk about some best practices, um, to recap some really important things that we need to make sure that we're aware of, and just make sure that we don't forget that just because we do this every time that our clients don't do it very often. So it's important to make sure to take the time to educate them about what it actually means and set the expectation for the process, you know, at the outset of our relationship. What do we talk about every day, every time? Is providing value, right? This is huge value. So we'll kind of start there. So somebody in their own terms, explain to me, you know, in a few sentences or words, how you explain the due diligence process um, to a buyer. Not all at once.
Well, I could say, just taking the money aspect out, it's the period of time where we have to really investigate the property, to inform ourselves as best we can that we know what we're getting into, and to possibly, if there are repairs that need to be done, to negotiate the repairs and or get that concession at close, to do the surveys, septic, etc., and use that as knowledge to go forward. Again, not mentioning the money aspect of time, but I think in a nutshell.
Okay.
I tell my clients it's their opportunity where they are buying time to go
Yeah.
through the motions to decide if they want to continue to move forward with the purchase of the house.
I really love that language. I use that too because it really helps to explain the money part, especially for folks that are coming from an area where due diligence really isn't a thing.
Yeah.
They don't understand why they have to put non-refundable money down. I think that is some of the best language I've ever heard. It's you're buying time from the seller. They're taking their home off the market. They can't sell it to anyone else. If you walk away, they have to start over. So basically, you're compensating them for that time in the middle. And I think if you can articulate it in or around that way, it really helps to click for folks who struggle
hmm
with understanding what due diligence is and why I have to provide this money up front when I don't know, what's going on with the house, et cetera.
Yeah, it's
And Doug,
very
that's exactly, I'm sorry.
no, no, no.
That's what I do. The very first thing that I do is explain to them, you're asking the seller to take their home off the market for X amount of days so that you can do an investigation to maybe walk away. And generally, when I explain it that way, my buyer goes, "Oh, I never thought of it like that." Yeah, you're right. This is my, get out of jail free card, so to speak. And you know, so
Yeah, I always say, not that this is our intention, but we don't
right.
go under contract with the intentions of walking away,
That's
but
right.
there's a time frame that allows us to continue on the motions to decide if we're still good to go. I said,
hmm
and they, as long as they understand, it's very, like Doug said, it's very different. North Carolina is like so different for people, and a lot of them are like, well, that's not fair and I can't believe that and
hmm
la la la. I'm like, we don't make the rules, man. Like, it is what it is. What you see is what you get unless you
hmm
negotiated otherwise. So
Yes,
do you
and I think that
want to do this or not?
yeah, I think that the due diligence part, the due diligence deposit is the different part, but every state has that 2-3 week negotiable
Inspection
time
period.
frame.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the house, it's also about the financing because
Yep.
we
Yep.
all know that those pre-approvals, yeah, they're pretty strong, but sometimes there are other options that they can explore, but also making sure their ducks are in a row and that
Yep.
loan is going to close.
Anything can happen at any time. And, you know, a, speaking of the financing, a question that I get asked sometimes, is, well, I know I have this pre-approval to make the offer, but if I decide to switch lenders, is that okay? And I'm like, well, that's a fantastic question. And quite honestly, yes, you do have the ability to do that, because right here it says must secure lending, blah, blah, blah. That's part of the due diligence process. I said, now, if you're changing the loan product, that's a completely different situation, and you're changing the terms of the contract, and you're going to have to ask the seller for permission on that. But I said, as long as you're still sticking with the same loan product, you are, quote, allowed to still shop lenders and compare. I said, it's not the ideal situation, because that does cut into your due diligence time to try to get all that figured out. I said, so the ideal situation is to have shopped these lenders on the front end and to decide what makes the most sense, so that that's who you kind of want to go with when you go under contract. But things happen all of the time. Rates are high for one reason or whatever. You're starting off with a bad experience, and as long as you have that open communication with the seller and say, hey, this is where we are, this is what's going on, I've not had an issue with that.
I think that's great. Good discussion, and really a great way to put it, everybody. And more than anything, to make sure that you're informing your client. So why don't how do and one thing I will always say, and maybe this is a good segue to the next point, is, and it will benefit you when you go to sell.
Yeah.
The North Carolina seller have a lot of protection, up that way. So how do you explain it to a seller who's never sold a house in North Carolina before? Kind of on the other foot.
I say I said in North Carolina, legally only the buyer can terminate a contract unless the buyer is in breach, and the chances of that happening is very, very low. I said, so it's very important that you understand this process, because once you sign this contract, that is it. You are committed. You have to sell your house to this buyer. Um, I said, so these are the things that we're going to look for when we have an offer. And if they've bought a house, it's a lot easier to go through the motion, because you can explain it on the reverse side. But if they've not purchased a house in North Carolina, then you have to explain the process to them. I said, by default, we represent sellers, and it's very, seller protective in this state. I said, when we get an offer, we're going to make sure that we have a due diligence that you're okay with, because anything can happen at any time along the way. And you want to make sure that your time is compensated for taking your house off the market in the event that this buyer decides that they don't want to do this anymore for whatever reason. You do have some collateral in your pocket, to protect you. And so I really do. I said, they're going to be buying all their own inspections, doing all of their own investigations. That's not any cost to you. I said, but there may be things that come up along the way that you don't even know about. Sometimes sellers don't even know about anything until the buyer gets an inspection on it. I said, so, legally, contractually, you don't have to do one single thing. I said, but it's important that you understand that this is what could happen, and these are things, this is how this works, and buyers do have the opportunity to ask for repairs and negotiations. And so this is their collateral for them, for you to take your house off the market, and for them to decide if they want to continue to move forward with it. Now, obviously, it comes off your bottom line when you close. So, just having them understand, because I'm telling you, every single agent will have a seller whose deal terminates. It's just part of the business. And so it's important that they understand that, like, this is what you get if they walk.
Anybody else have anything to add?
Nope, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So now we've kind of talked about how to make sure you're couching it correctly to provide that value, and understanding due diligence in North Carolina. Now let's talk a little bit more about the money. So how is the due diligence fee structured, or how do you determine what that number is?
I kind
My
of do it
clients
based
usually,
on what my client can afford, and B, the price of the house, and if it looks like that something may come back on inspections. Like if something is questionable that we don't know if it's going to come back as an issue or not, then obviously that's probably going to reflect the amount of due diligence that we put down.
Okay.
Great
Doug?
question.
Yes.
I tell my clients if I'm helping a buyer that they want to come in, if they want the house, a strong, clean offer. And I'll tell them to start out, if you can afford 1% earnest money, 1% due diligence, that would, come, be a strong offer. If they can't do it, then that's fine. We go back and, we find out what they can afford. But my first and foremost job as a buyer's agent is to make sure that they come in with a strong offer.
Yes. Very, very well put.
I
And I
tell my
think
clients that obviously what Kelly said and what Connor said, the most important thing is understanding your buyer's cash flow situation.
Mhm.
I say, look, guys, everybody's situation is different. If they need concessions, there's probably not a lot of due diligence that they're going to be able to put up on the table. So we talk about that before we even write an offer. Okay,
Mhm.
guys, what are we looking at? Are you able to write this check out the gate and get rid of this money? And if everything falls apart, this is what you lose. And if they say, well, I've only got $1,000, I'm like, okay, then that's what it is. And that's what we do.
Right.
And so I say I always advise there is no set number for this. It's completely negotiable between the buyer and the seller. Quite frankly, quite legally, due diligence and earnest money are not even required for the contract. I said, but you're not going to buy a house without a due diligence on the line. I said, um,
Mhm.
so it's I always advise at the very bare minimum $1,000. If that's something that you can do, great. We can start there. The seller can always counter us if they want more, and then we just kind of go from there. But I would say what Connor said, price point of the home. I mean, the due diligence that I expect on $1 million house is not the same due diligence that I expect on a
Right.
$250,000 house in Jacksonville. That buyer market is completely different, right? And so,
Mhm.
if you're going to choose to write the offer with earnest, if your people want to write due diligence and earnest money, I mean, it's buyer's best interest to put more in earnest money than due
Mhm.
diligence. But uh, when I represent a seller, earnest money is whatever. It goes to the attorney. They're never going to see it. The chances that a buyer is going to back out after earnest period is very low. So as a
Yeah.
seller, I care more about due diligence money. Quite frankly, I don't know the last time I've written an offer with earnest money. Most of the deals we're doing are in this area, in my experience. I don't know, Connor and Mark and Ellen can say the same, is just due diligence money.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the buyer's means anyway. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's just at the end of the day, it's negotiable. My buyers wrote an offer and this the sellers came back asking for a lot of due diligence. And my people were like, we can't do that. And we couldn't agree to terms. So we moved on, and it put a bad taste in their mouth because the house wasn't super crazy expensive. And, it's like, are they hiding anything? Something
Yeah.
like that. So it just, but to Kelly's point, how long has the house been on the market? Are you in multiple offers or not? Bless you, Doug.
Thank you.
If you're in multiple offers, you better up that due diligence. If you can't, you better figure out another way to make your offer look strong. So there's so many
Totally
factors
agree.
that go
Yeah, I
into
totally
that.
agree, Janine. That was a really great point right there. And
Thanks.
also what's going on with the house too. So
Correct.
there are some homes that are maybe are older
Yeah.
and you can't, there's something, maybe that they have a crawl space and it's a 1980 home.
45 house.
Right? So and you all have that conversation about,
Yeah,
not about what you can afford, but what can you afford to lose? Because
that's right.
it goes
Exactly.
back, it
Yeah.
goes against the deposit, but in the event that get into this inspection and there are some major things that are a concern on this house, you still would lose your due diligence. So do you
That's right.
really, can you,
And
do you walk
everything
away
you've
from
put
that?
into up to that point, mind them.
Correct.
Your
Yeah.
appraisal, your inspection, your all the money you've spent up to that point is a sunk
Yeah.
cost.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that was another thing that I was going to say is that, I try to explain to my buyers, this is money that, if you walk away, you're losing. So how much are you willing to lose?
Yep.
And sometimes it's $500.
Yeah.
I have written a lot of, offers with just
Yeah.
500.
Same.
And then I
Same.
have one client, that I've sold multiple, I've helped them multiple times, that when we go in, he says he lost his due diligence one time and it was 500. He said, I'll never do it again. Any contract that, any offer we write, we always write with 0 due diligence. And
Oof.
almost every time he's gotten it with no due diligence.
Kelly, I'm with you. That's a conversation I have with my clients as well whenever they're talking about due diligence. Like the guy I just closed, he was like, well, I can put $5,000 down. And then the conversation was, okay, now if something happens with this house, if we have to walk away, is $5,000 going to make or break you buying your another house?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
it was. So then I was like, well, we need to reevaluate what we're
That's
putting
right.
down
That's right.
just in case, we don't want to walk away, but if we have to, then we need to be able to afford to buy something else.
I mean, anything
Right.
can happen. Your loan can fall through. You can lose your job. The inspection report can suck. I mean, anything can happen. I've seen it. I had a freaking buyer die under contract, so like anything can happen. So yeah, what are you willing to lose, Connor? Exactly.
Yeah.
What are you willing to lose? And that's the hard spot because you can't tell them. You can't tell them what that number is. They have to
No.
decide what
Right.
that number is. Yes, we don't want to go into this with the intentions of walking away, but we don't know what is
That's
to
right.
come. And so what are you willing to lose? But also, how bad do you want the house? If you know that you lost the house because somebody paid $1 more than you, are you okay at bed at night over that?
Yeah.
My cousin is an agent in Maryland, and she talked to her this morning. She's like, I'm showing houses to people that lost a house in October and they're still not over it. And I'm like, well, they better figure out a way to move on from that, and so that's a hard pill to swallow. Okay, well, what did they do wrong in October that now they have to figure out a way to win now?
Yeah. Did they
So
learn anything from it?
exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And you all make really good points. We can't tell them what to offer, or
That's right.
they don't have to listen to us, but it is important that we're setting those expectations for
Yep.
what we're seeing happen out there to give
Yep.
them a general idea. Because, as we know, people come with their own preconceived notions, and sometimes they're accurate, but sometimes they're way off. And
Mhm.
that's why we have to have the conversations up front to kind of put them on the right path for success. Not
Yep.
because we want them to risk more, but you said you want to accomplish the goal. Well, based on my experience, to accomplish your goal, this is what it's going to take. So, are you
Yep.
prepared up front? Do you have money set aside for it? What's your risk tolerance?
Yep.
Do you understand it? If you lose it, is it going to prevent you from being able to move on another house? You
Yep.
know,
Great
I,
point.
so those are all really important things to talk about, especially since it's non-refundable, right?
That's right.
Except in obviously in
The
the
credit.
of a
Yeah.
seller
Same.
breach, something like that. Um, let's see, just really quickly, just about earnest money, again, also negotiable, more standard that it's 1%. Don't
Mhm.
forget, if your folks are a little strapped on cash out of pocket right now, you can always deliver earnest money later on.
That's right.
There's an option to deliver the earnest money in multiple parts or just later on. Say you're putting a lot up for due diligence, but you still need to do earnest money, or they just don't have enough to do due diligence and earnest money right now. You can always structure it to deliver the earnest money later
Yeah.
on, because technically it's not, I mean, technically it's due within 5 days, but it's not up for risk until the end of the due diligence period.
Doug, can I jump in real quick? Something that I just learned. It's 2025, right? And so I think that more people are dealing with like Venmo, Zelling, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
quite honestly prefer that because
Yes.
it gets there immediately when the contract says it's due, but you still have elderly sellers or people that don't have any of that online stuff, and they still have to do the bank thing. So when you're representing a seller, make sure that if the buyer is delivering it by check, that you get a picture of the check and tracking, because that can just and explain, like, we're not going to be turds. We know it's in the mail. It may not be here tomorrow. They may get the inspection before we receive the check, but we can only control what we can control. But I did have a buyer, and you guys probably know this, but it just took me a minute to learn. He's VA and he's Navy Fed, and the seller was Navy Fed, and he freaking emailed the due diligence to the seller. And I was like, okay, This was too easy. This was way too easy. And I made them do like $1 to test it. And then they did the rest of it.
Yeah.
And as long as the lender says it's cool, like that's how due diligence needs to be delivered via email, Zelle, Venmo. Like, I'm sorry, that's just how it needs to be done.
Yeah.
Super convenient, isn't it? It's-
It is.
95% of my clients have done like either Zelle, Venmo caps out at like $1,000.
1,000. Yeah, they had to do like
So,
three
but
different
Zelle
transactions.
is so easy because it goes from
Yes.
your bank account to their bank
theirs.
account, and it
Yes.
has to be verified.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah, it's great. That's
there's
how
no
I think.
mailing a check. There's no going up there.
So
So I
I'll
think
always
something-
check on the offer. Like I'll check all the boxes until I
Yeah.
know exactly which one they're doing.
And
That's a
I
great way
love
to
what
approach it.
Janine said.
Communication part thing, you know, ask your clients what they want to do. Ask the
Yep.
agent if the seller is able to do any of that.
Yeah.
One of
Hey,
the things that
Doug.
we
Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say, I love what Janine said about if you're going to Zelle $1 first
Yep.
before, because that would be a sad thing
Yep.
to, for someone to lose some money because, they
I
Zelled
said,
it to the
just Zelle
wrong
and send me a
person.
screenshot that it went through or was received, and then we're
Yeah.
good. And then I text
Yeah.
the agent, and then they send the rest.
that's a
Yeah.
great
Yeah,
practice.
that's great.
That's
That
a
is
good
good.
idea. I don't.
Every
One of the
single
things,
time.
one of the things that Connor and I just recently did was, I don't know if you guys know that Watson Legal, they, like, if you've got someone who has EMD and DD and they are old school and they only want to work by check or possibly wire, we've been able to wire the funds to Watson, and they then separated and gave us a check right away to get out to the DD.
That's
And
great.
isn't it? It's ease
Yeah.
of doing business is what it's all about, right? Some like Zelle.
So they just wired to the attorney, and the attorney cut the check to the seller?
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, damn. Okay. That's good.
And then we just drop the check off with the
Agent.
agent. Yeah.
All right. Good to know. See, you learn something new every day.
Lots of different options out there. And it's funny though, you know, although like the due diligence and the earnest money is moving towards being delivered digitally a lot, your commission payments aren't.
Yeah.
Attorneys are back to checks. They're
What
not
the
wiring
hell?
them anymore. Kind of weird, but
Yeah.
you know, everybody's just worried about fraud, and I get
Yeah.
it completely. So, let's see. So we've talked about a little bit like what it means, how much it is, the reasons for it, etc. Let's dig a little bit more into what actually happens during the due diligence process. Obviously, home inspections, you know, we're reminding people, hey, we're going to have a home inspection done because we've got the property disclosure, but it's not always accurate, right? People don't know. A lot of people don't know they've got termites or that they've got a plumbing issue or a roof issue or a structural issue or something like that. So it's not that they lied to us. They just don't know, right?
Right.
So we're going to get the home inspection to find out what we're in. But remember, North Carolina, it's buyer beware. Caveat emptor. What does that mean? It means that, you know, the seller doesn't have to fix anything, right? But most people negotiate in good faith, especially if it becomes a material fact.
That's right.
And material facts cover a whole lot of things.
Lot.
Because they have to be disclosed by their agent, you know, and we're going to tell their agent, hey, here's what's going on. We've got material facts here. So, you know, can we negotiate repairs? Can we negotiate, you know, a credit? It's also important to talk to your folks, I think, during this period about, well, what do they want? Do they
Yeah.
want repairs? I don't want to deal with this. Or do they want a credit? Heck, I'll do it myself. I'm a carpenter, you know, something like
Yep.
that. So
Yeah.
understanding what your folks are willing to do and then structuring your DD ask in a way, you know, that makes sense. And even talking with the other agent, hey, are the sellers up for a credit? We'll get estimates. You know, we don't, and in some cases they're going to want to get their own estimate, which is completely understandable. But you know, what are we working here? Let's make sure you're dialoguing and not assuming.
Yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
going to work best for everybody? Because what do we want to do? We want to come
Close
to
it.
a resolution, right? But
Close
we
it.
want everybody to be happy about the process and work
right.
towards what we're all trying to get to. You know, another thing is what else is happening other than inspections during that period?
Appraisal.
The
Yeah.
appraisal, right? So we want to make sure it's worth what they're paying for it, right?
Dealing with that right now. Yeah.
So to that end, we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves enough time to get the multiple home inspections, termite, radon, septic, well, roof, HVAC, pool, whatever it is, you're getting inspected, and the appraisal back in enough time to discuss and craft the due diligence request, and then give the sellers an opportunity to do their own investigation, get estimates, etc. 3 weeks is a long time. That's why it's so important that when we get stuff under contract, we get the information to April right away if she's scheduling your inspections, or if you're going to schedule your own, you get them done right away. Because typically, it's going to be a few days before they can get out there. And then I know you guys at the coast aren't doing radon probably a lot, but we talked about the importance of looking at that now based on what I sent in the group the other day. It is showing up over the allowed amount in Onslow, Pender, and New Hanover counties. There were cases in the past year down there. So it's something you need to make sure you're explaining to your clients. And there's a info
Booklet. Yeah.
there's a booklet, yep, in Dotloop that you can share, which will help, explain it a little bit better. But for those of you who haven't done radon or haven't done a lot of it, they drop it off and it has to sit for 3 days.
Yeah.
So they have to come back and get it.
And
then
it's not cheap either.
No,
So, yeah.
I've
Hey,
done one.
how much
Yeah,
is there?
I'll
It's a
have to
few
look back.
$100s.
It
Yeah.
shouldn't be. It's like 150 or 100 here. It's basically the same as a pest inspection.
I was
Hey,
gonna say, I
Doug.
think when Sean did my ours, it was like 350 or something like
Yeah.
that.
It's probably because a lot of people down there aren't doing it.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but my guy so now we're working with Blake at
Yeah.
the coast. I
Yeah.
bet it's not as much with him.
Hey, Doug, what do
Yes,
you
ma'am.
think about us, the buyer doing their own radon? I was told that you could buy the kit from like Lowe's.
You can.
Yep.
I mean, if the seller will allow them to place it in there and you're comfortable with those results, but there's a reason I don't cut my own hair.
Okay.
I do.
I've never, I've never told a buyer, do a radon test yourself. I explain it to them and then they generally say, no, we don't
No.
think that,
Yeah.
that's an
That's
issue.
necessary. Yeah.
But I know when I was in school, I remember them saying, you can get a radon test and
Yeah.
do it yourself.
I remember when I started working at the coast, I'd never had a buyer not do a radon. I mean, it's
Oh, really?
standard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, the soil is more rocky here, which helps the
Yeah.
prevalence
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah.
And it's sandy down at the beach.
Yeah.
But obviously
Yeah.
it's still happening. So again, you can tell your people all that and then they make the decision and then
That's
they
right.
check the right box
That's right.
on the professional services disclosure.
Doug,
Just
can I
make
go back to what you were saying about the time frame for due diligence?
Yeah.
I'm dealing with this right now. So I always, especially with VA, I always try to get 3.5 weeks because VA has their own world and you have no control. And it could be, yeah, it has 10 days, but it could be a week before the freaking thing even gets assigned in the portal.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
my due diligence on my house ended yesterday. Literally, everything's done. We negotiated repairs. The sellers even allowed our handyman to go in there, fix the items, and we sent the invoice and they're paying it. Literally, the only thing we are waiting on is appraisal.
Yep.
So it was done on Friday. Due diligence ended yesterday. And I was like, where is it? What's going on? So I told my people, I was like, here's the deal. Due diligence is up. We don't have any earnest money on the line. We're still waiting on appraisal. We still have the ability to negotiate after due diligence, even if we need to. I said, extending due diligence. If you had earnest money on the line, yes, I would advise extending due diligence. At this point, I don't see a reason to extend due diligence.
No.
The only thing we're waiting on is appraisal. And we just have to get through that. So I explained to them. So then of course I get tidewatered yesterday. So the agent calls me at 3:00 and I get tidewatered. I'm like, that's why it's not back yet, because you did it on Friday and you're taking 5 days to decide that you need to tidewater us. So then I called the listing agent, had a conversation with her. She's like, of course, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. I was like, listen, are your people? She's like, listen, we're getting this shit to the closing table. I was like, okay. So she said, my people are in a position to be able to, get this done as long as they don't have to come out of pocket. So having that conversation when you hit a road bump like that during due diligence and an appraisal, so that because my people are crazy worry warts and I needed to just let them know that, like, this is on the agents now to get this done, and we can't control this, and we just have to wait, and everybody's come this far, and we're gonna get it done. So, freaking Tidewater. But yeah, I always try to get 3.5 weeks. And look, that wasn't even long enough because it's VA. But yeah, it takes so long with the VA.
Well, and if you remember too, even during COVID when things were just nuts, I mean, appraisals for VA took forever, like every
Forever.
I
single one
think
of them.
they have 14 days to get the
10,
appraisal back to you.
10, they have
10?
10. Mm-hmm.
So, a couple of things to unpack from that. So, obviously, a different situation if you're in VA and earnest money's not on the line. Yeah, there's no reason really to extend due diligence unless you're dealing with one of these agents who is like, we're not negotiating after the DD period. There's nothing saying that you can't do that,
Yeah.
but some people might just advise their clients, hey, we're past the DD period.
Yeah.
Let's not negotiate. So just make sure, again, go the extra mile, have the conversation. Hey, the appraisal's not going to be back. I don't see any reason to extend due diligence because there's no earnest money on the line. Or if there is earnest money on the line, you're still protected
That's right, by the VA.
a buyer if
Yep.
it doesn't
That's
appraise.
right.
The earnest money is refundable. So what you're really talking about is it okay to wait until we get this back to start repair requests, or can we go ahead and start it? Obviously, with conventional or anything else where your earnest money is going to be on the line, you want to make sure that you're ahead of it
Yep.
and you're not waiting until noon the day DD expires to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, as a listing agent, that shit happens all the time. You don't hear anything, you don't hear anything, you don't hear anything, and then you get a DD request at noon the day before due diligence is up, and now you expect your sellers to formulate a response before 5 o'clock the next day. Are you kidding me? Don't be that agent. Don't be that buyer's agent that puts that kind of pressure on the sellers, because that's not fair. Now, I understand there are some things that you can't control, like we didn't get the inspection report back for 4 days or whatever the case may be, but that's always a pain in the ass to have to scramble like that. And I've also had buyers terminate 2 hours before due diligence has been up. So, it's like Doug said, if you can get it out, and I tell my clients, I want to get this over to the sellers as quickly as possible so they have time to think about this and decide what they want to do. Understand the appraisal's not back and they may not give us an answer until we're through the appraisal, but at least they have the information that they want in front that we want in front of them. And also, if we get an answer from them that's not favorable, we can always go do our own quotes and stuff. And if you're sending stuff that is like major, it's always a good idea, in my opinion, if you can, to send a quote with it so that the sellers aren't thinking that you just grabbed a number out your butt and are just whatever.
Yeah.
So that's always best practice, in my opinion. But yeah, as a listing agent, I'm always gonna advise to give a credit instead of doing the repair. Obviously, unless it's like a leak or something like that, you want to get ahead of that stuff. But explain to your buyers, if they do this repair, it's on them at their cost with their vendor, how they want to do it. And but it's not all I tell my buyers, if this is something that you're comfortable handling after closing on your own, then either don't ask for it or be open to just a credit so that you can handle it by yourself. But my people, they're like, well, we want this money for the repair. We don't want it to just go into the lump sum. And I'm like, okay, well, the only way to really do that is to hire a vendor and have them paid before or after closing. So we were able to, the sellers were
Yeah.
great
Get an
about,
invoice to the attorney, they can
yeah,
close.
the sellers were
Even if
really
it's
great.
before the work's done or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the sellers were great about letting our guy do the work.
So another
Hey,
thing
Doug,
go ahead, Kelly.
I have a question. Something Janine triggered in my mind. She said she had a buyer who didn't bring a due diligence request until like the day before due diligence ends. What is your thoughts on, I know what my thoughts are, but what's your thoughts on if you haven't heard from your buyers, from the buyer's agent a week before due diligence is up, reaching out to them and saying, hey, are you guys planning on bringing a due diligence
Yep.
request? It will
Yes.
give some idea
Yes.
of what's going on with them
Yes.
if you're hearing nothing but crickets from
Yes.
them.
Correct. I give it maybe like, if I know the inspection's been done and I'm going to give them at least 3 days to do. And if I know that the inspection, if it's been a week after the inspection and I haven't heard anything, I'm going to reach out and be like, hey, everything go okay with the inspection? Can we expect a repair request? And then a lot of the times it's, I haven't gotten the report back yet, or they'll be like, this thing came up and we're getting an HVAC guy out, or whatever the case may be. So yes, Kelly, constant communication, because I don't want my sellers to be stressed out at the last
Right.
minute, having to make a
Yeah.
freaking decision when that comes in at
Yeah.
the 11th hour.
Yeah. And that was my thought was,
Yeah.
it should be okay to reach out and find
Yes.
out where their head is.
Yes.
What I'm going to encourage you to do as a buyer agent is let the listing agent know, hey, we got the report back. We're going over it. We're getting estimates or whatever. I'm going to have something to you either later this week or whatever.
Right.
You know, remembering what it's like to be a listing agent when you haven't heard from somebody, right? That way you don't
Exactly.
have to do it. But yeah, if you haven't, you should definitely reach out. Another point I want to make here is, you know, I don't typically recommend specialists until we have the home inspection. So like I won't recommend a HVAC inspection or a roof
That's
inspection
right.
until we get the report
100%.
back. And what I'll tell my people is, you know, if there's something on there, then we can ask for them to have a professional come out and make a repair if as needed as part of the DD request. So you're not paying for another inspection out of your pocket. Now,
Mhm.
unless you're aware something is wrong,
Ahead of time.
right.
Yeah.
You would
Yeah.
wait for that. But I mean, if you know something's wrong up front, you could ask for that as part of the offer with
Yeah.
provision, right?
Yep.
Hey, have a roof inspector come out, or
Yep.
hey, have a septic inspector come out, or a well come out. So, you know, anything like that, you can ask all of those things as part of the offer to get them to agree to
Great
as well.
point.
So just remember that and kind of keep that in mind. Another thing to make sure of is, you know, make sure, of course, they should have it before they make an offer. But if your folks are planning on, you know, putting up a fence or putting in a pool or adding an accessory dwelling unit, or they want to park their boat in the yard, make sure that they've thoroughly checked the HOA docs. Or if they want to rent the property out short term or something
Yeah.
like that, make sure that they've checked it. Or they want chickens, any of that stuff.
You ain't getting chickens in Sneed's Ferry if you have an HOA, because that was with my people and they're moving. I said, they're like, okay, we're not bringing our chickens. I'm like, yeah, you're not bringing your chickens.
Yeah.
I have never had to search an HOA for chickens. Like,
I have.
Same.
I've had to search for chickens more than one time. Like,
Oh, yes.
I've never thought I would have to like search for
Same.
based on whether you could have
And
chickens.
every single one specifically says it. No poultry.
Yes.
Now
I-
there are some that, and I cannot tell you which ones it is, but when COVID hit, they went back and amended their HOA to say that you could have at least 10, up to 10 chickens.
Wow.
So
Well, with the price of
definitely
eggs, that might be
don't
coming back.
yeah, don't take it for granted that, you know, they won't allow it, because some of them have made amendments to their covenants.
Yeah, that's
And
I
so
know
many
I-
people don't allow it. And, you know, I will be honest, you know, we all have that client who's like, well, what happens if I get caught? I'm like, well, they can tell you to remove them.
yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
I can't tell you that, yes, you can
I've
have
told
them.
you X.
Yeah.
What you do after, that's on you, bro.
Yeah.
Are y'all, I know the topic today is TD and I don't want to squirrel from that. And, but are y'all sending the HOA docs to your clients in dot loop and having them
Yes.
sign it when you're sending
Yeah.
it? Okay,
Yes.
good.
I'm
Yes.
not
If you're
having
not,
them
you need
sign
to.
it, but I'm sending, because it's like a 45-page document before they go under contract. I'm sending this, hey, read through this.
I have my people initial.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's what I do. That's
Usually
what I
the-
do.
the
You're not
first
going to call
page.
me back in 6 months and say I wasn't aware of this. You signed it.
Yeah.
If you didn't read
Right.
it, that's on you.
Yep.
What did I miss?
A lot.
Nothing.
You have to watch the video. We're
Okay,
41 minutes in now.
All right, I'll
Sorry.
do that.
But some other things to talk about is, okay, so we've talked a lot about the buy side, but make sure that you're setting the expectation for your buyer also. Hey, part of the DD process is finishing your loan
Yeah.
stuff, right? So make sure you're getting your stuff to your lender in a timely fashion. I just got a loan because we're doing some work at the house, and holy shit. I'm like,
Yep.
this is an equity loan. Are you kidding me? This is such a pain in the butt, but you got to do it. So make sure you're telling your people, hey, you got to get your documents together and get it to the lender. You don't want to risk getting through due diligence and then something shows up and now you're out your earnest money too.
And they will say, I had my clients are like, is it normal for them to ask for this? I'm like, yup, send it 6 times. They're going to ask because it's
Yeah.
changing hands. It's going to the processor. It's going to the closer. It's going to the
Mhm.
underwriter. Send
Mhm.
that shit. Even if you've sent it 3 times, just
Yeah.
keep sending it. It's normal.
Right.
Sending it. I know I sent multiple W-2s multiple
Yeah.
times. It just is
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've talked about the buy side, setting the expectations for what the seller should expect for due diligence. So let's put that shoe on the other foot. And you're doing your list appointment. You figured everything out. Okay, now we're under contract. We negotiated it out. You reminded them why due diligence is important, and you want to fight for it to be in the offer terms, right? To protect
Yep.
your sellers. Remind them why. Okay, so what's going to happen for the buyer next during the due diligence period? What are you telling your sellers?
Expect them to get anything they wanted inspected under the sun. You're going to see the requests come through just like showings, but it's specific to inspection, appraisal, pest, and I'll let you know along the way what's being done. And at some point, I would expect a repair request. And when that time comes, we'll go through everything together and decide how you want to respond. At my list appointment, I explained to them that legally they don't have to do anything, but it's in their best interest to put their best foot forward. And if there's anything that they know about ahead of time, we need to tackle that before we list so that there's the least amount of things to deal with while we're under contract. If you know you've got a downspout gutter, if you know you've got a leaky faucet, if you know you've got whatever, get that fixed before we list, because we really want to get ahead of that. I mean, the biggest example I have is a house that was a rancher in Jacksonville, and they had a really bad experience when they bought it. And I said, is there anything that I need to know about this property? And they said, and because it was on a crawl space, Ellen, and it was it was an old house. And I said, does anything come up with the crawl space on the inspection? They're like, well, there was this joist issue. I was like, okay, did you ask the sellers to address that? They're like, yeah, they said everything was fine. I said, okay, do you have something from them? Do you have anything saying that it was inspected or investigated or signed? They're like, no, we were just told everything was fine. I was like, oh, good Lord. I said, okay, well, now that you've told me this is a material fact and this is a structural issue. So I have a duty to disclose that there could be a structural issue. My advice is we get a structural engineer to evaluate the crawl space and we decide how you want to go about this. So that's what we did. And y'all, you'd have thought they bought a lemon with what was under that crawl space. And so I said, okay, here's the deal. So God bless them, they hired a crawl space company and they went out there, they got the work done, they financed it, they got a warranty on it, they had all of the information, they sent it over to me, put it in the MLS with the listing. We got $10,000 over the list price because the buyer's agent said that their buyer was extremely comfortable moving forward with this property because of the information that and the work that my people disclosed and said that, everything was good. Now that buyer still got their own structural engineer to evaluate because they can. And that structural engineer said this, this, and this. And my sellers called the crawl space company and they got it done and off we went. And so it's just really important that you educate your sellers to put their best foot forward. I said, and if you don't do this, that's fine. We just have to disclose it, and that could decrease the amount of people that are interested in the property, or we need to reflect this in the price. So they chose to do it the right way, and they paid it off at closing, and the buyer got the warranty, and all was fine. So it's really, really important that sellers do what they should. Now, they're not all going to do all the things all the time. But I always tell them, if it's a material fact that comes up, we have to disclose it. Even if you don't want to disclose it, I'm disclosing it because that's my license. Now, what you decide to do with that and how you want to address that issue, that's your decision. I said, but if this buyer walks because of this, now I have to disclose this, and issue is not going away, and the next buyer is going to have to deal with it. So what do you want to do? And when you have that conversation, they're like, okay, yeah, let's give the credit, let's get the quote, let's do the thing. I'm always going to defer on the side of giving a credit to a buyer unless it's something that needs to be treated immediately, like a leak or something like that. That's
And
my
to that
opinion.
point as well, if you're a buyer agent, even if you're not ready to disclose the whole or to submit the whole DD request, if there's something active happening, ask
Oh,
your client if
yes.
it's okay to go ahead and tell the listing agent, hey, look, you've got active termites. We'll get you the DD request, but this is going to be on it. You should get somebody out
Yep.
there right away, or active leak or something like that. Hopefully that makes sense, and you're doing that already, but that's what we're here to talk about.
And Doug, I've even had the home inspectors call me from the house. You got a leak. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Call the listing agent. And immediately that seller is on it. They're already taking care of the issue before your buyers even know about it,
And
So,
people appreciate that, I
oh,
think.
100%. And
Mhm.
like you said, they don't even hardly know sometimes what's going on.
And Janine, back to what you
Yeah.
were saying before about your
Yeah.
people who went under contract. For the due diligence repair request, that's why on the top of it, I always put with pictures and receipts.
Yes, that's what
So that way
that's
we
what I told you
know
to
it's
do.
been done by a
Yep.
professional and the work has
Yep.
actually been done, and it's not
Yep.
just them saying, oh yeah, we did it, it's good.
Yes, 100%. Get the receipts. Get the receipts. Same language I kind of use on at the top of the DD request. I always put the following items from the home inspect or from the inspection reports done by licensed professionals as applicable with paid receipts provided. And then I don't write a bunch of detail. I write the page and the item number from the home inspection report.
Same.
That's it. I don't want to mince words. I don't
Yep.
want them to read that I only meant part of it when I meant the
Yep.
whole thing or whatever.
Yep.
So I take the guesswork out of it. Page 2, item 3. Go ahead,
Yep.
Kelly.
Hey, Doug, so your question was, how do we explain the process? That's what we're doing, right?
Mhm.
I have a document that's called contract to close, that, I've come up with, and, because this can be a lot of information. And when I first started out and I was trying to explain things, in my buyers or my sellers meeting, I get this deer in the headlight look. I mean, they're checking out
Oh, yeah.
after so long.
Mhm.
So I put things down on paper so, I can go over it with them fairly quickly that way, and they can take it with them. And I've also emailed it, so that's something that it can refer back to.
100%. And if you share our buying and selling guides, there's a next steps after contract in
Yes.
there too
Yeah.
that outlines, hey, this is what to expect next. April is also sending out a hey, this is what's next through Dot Loop. So they should be getting it from a lot of different ways, and it's really cool because yeah, after about 20 minutes of talking about in the strategy
Mhm.
session or whatever you want to call it, people do start to glaze over because they're ready to talk about the search, right?
Yeah.
I want to
Mhm.
start looking at houses, but just as a reminder, and that's why I always suggest, when you're sending that working with real estate agents, or even before that, share the strategy guide in the loop in dot
Yes.
loop with them so you
Yes.
have it digitally
Yes.
documented that they've received those items in the agency agreements that you're required to provide so you can check that box.
100%. I literally just did that this morning. Yeah.
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 Digital paper trail. Okay, so we've talked about negotiation, and we've talked about exit strategy. Of course, a buyer can always terminate, but we know kind of what's at risk depending on the date, etc. We've shared some really good scenarios, and maybe lessons learned.
Mm.
That you've been doing this for a while. Who has something else to add? I think really the most important thing is setting the right expectations for buyers and sellers up front, not just the money amounts, but why, the dates,
Mhm.
and then kind of what to expect along the way.
Two things real quick. In the rare situation where I ask the seller to fix something for my buyer, just like y'all said, ask for receipts. But I ask for the work to be completed and have receipts at least 5 days prior to closing so we have time to check it out. I don't want the work done the day before closing and then I get out to the house for the final walkthrough the morning of closing and the work is subpar and we have to start renegotiating again, because if my buyer's rate lock expires the day of closing or the day after, we could have a problem. So
Yeah.
I always say I want the work done X number of days in advance. with my sellers, especially right now in the market that we're in, I set the expectation that you need to be prepared to negotiate to a degree on repairs.
Yep.
We're not going to give up the ghost, but we're not losing this transaction over $2,000 because you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. A
Right.
$2,000 repair request when your monthly mortgage is $3,600. Let's swallow our pride a little bit. And when I explain that on the front side, I don't have a problem.
100%.
Mhm.
And in 5 years, are you going to miss that $2,000 when you've sold your house and you're walking with 100K? No, you're not.
Yeah. And also, you know, I'll tell my sellers, we know this problem exists and it's not going to go away. So, you know, if you don't address it now, you're going to be addressing it with the next buyer.
Mhm.
100%.
You also have to change the disclosure. And
Yes.
don't you think all those people are going to want to know what happened, why that deal
Yep.
fell apart, and what you've done to
Yep.
remediate the problem?
Yep.
Great discussion, guys. All right. Anything else to add? Anything unclear about the DD process? We've talked about a lot. From expectations at the beginning to why and when and how much to even how to deliver it, etc. What else? Is there anything else?
I think that's good.
It's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, get out of here. Go negotiate some due diligences.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks,
Hey, just
guys.
Guys.
FYI, real quick, Coast folks, our monthly meeting is next Tuesday. We'll meet at the office at 11 like usual, and then we're going to go to lunch. And Ben wants to join us, so he's going to pop in.
Oh, I had
And
it on the 5th. So it's on the 4th.
they're on, it's on Tuesdays.
Oh, crap. Okay. I think the last one was Wednesday. That's why I got confused. Okay.
Yeah, I think we had to move one, but the recurring date should be the first Tuesday of every.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Fixed.
And then just also really quickly, for Mastermind next week, don't have a topic yet. So I am open to ideas. The last two were suggested by you guys. Connor suggested DD. So thank you, Connor. And then Mark suggested the condo thing from last week. So I'm up. I'm
Yeah.
up for suggestions. If you've got one, please send it to me.
Can we do one
I
for
think the
comp?
condo idea is sorry, I was saying, I think the condo idea is great because, you know, I probably need a good refresher in that.
Go check it out. It was a good discussion. It should be on the YouTube page.
Okay.
What were you saying, Connor?
Can we do one on like comps, like what I saw Janine, she was giving us a brief description of her running comps, but how you do it, Janine, that would be
Sure.
great.
Yeah, we can definitely do it. We'll do it next week.
I hate running comps.
I had
Um,
my clients. I have some past clients. I've done a couple deals with them. They bought me a shirt and a wine glass that says "Running comps is my cardio."
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good client. All right. I will update that right now, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for the participation, the ideas. Have a great day.
Ellen, your
Thank you,
listing
Dad.
is freaking
you.
amazing.
Yeah, if anybody has a buyer, I have open house